What happens when a routine debate on daytime TV suddenly feels too real? When a guest's blunt perspective collides head-on with a host who's had enough. From the second Kevin O'Leary stepped onto the set, something felt different. Viewers at home saw the usual smiles, but inside the studio, the air carried an edge that hadn't been there before. Joy Behar opened the conversation with a simple economic question, the kind she had asked 1,000 times. But Kevin's reply, sharp, confident, and unapologetically direct, shifted the temperature instantly. Joy challenged him. Kevin challenged back. What began as a discussion about financial literacy cracked open into a deeper clash of worldviews. The co-hosts tried to steady the ship, but the exchange only grew heavier, each sentence landing harder than the last. As their voices tightened, something unspoken simmered beneath the debate. Frustration, exhaustion, conviction. It didn't feel like television anymore. It felt personal. And although this is a dramatized recreation, the emotion behind it mirrors what millions have seen. Two people who believe deeply in completely different solutions colliding without room to step back. But what pushed this moment beyond a normal disagreement? What cracked open the facade of daytime calm? It only took one sentence to shift the entire room. Joy Behar leaned in, trying to ground the conversation in the struggles of everyday Americans. But Kevin O'Leary's response landed with a force that tightened every face at the table. He insisted that mindset mattered more than circumstance, a viewpoint he delivers often, but today it struck differently. The studio fell quieter, as if everyone sensed a boundary had been brushed against. Joy pushed back with emotion in her voice, pointing out the reality of people juggling multiple jobs. Kevin countered with equal conviction, arguing that value, not effort, determines economic reward. The tension didn't come from volume. It came from certainty. Two people, both convinced they were right, speaking past each other with unwavering belief. The other hosts tried to redirect the energy, but the conversation had taken on a life of its own. Each attempt to soften the edges only made the disagreement sharper. The audience, usually quick to laugh or react, sat frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing a debate or something far more vulnerable. And although this is a dramatized retelling, the emotion behind moments like this is familiar to anyone who's watched passionate voices collide. It wasn't about politics anymore. It wasn't even about economics. It was about two very different interpretations of fairness, responsibility, and what people owe to each other. A line had been crossed, not intentionally, not maliciously, but undeniably. The moment things shifted from tense to personal happened almost silently. A single pause, a breath. Joy Behar challenged Kevin O'Leary's belief that economic struggle comes down to personal discipline, and Kevin answered with a calmness that somehow made his words hit even harder. He spoke about responsibility, about value, about choices, ideas he champions regularly. But Joy heard something deeper, something that echoed beyond the studio lights. Her expression tightened, not in anger at first, but in disbelief. She asked how someone could look at people working themselves to exhaustion and still frame the issue as a matter of effort. Kevin sat forward, meeting her frustration with unbending certainty. He insisted that blame wasn't the point, empowerment was. But intent didn't matter anymore. What Joy heard felt like an indictment of people she had spent her career trying to defend. The audience sensed it. The co-hosts felt it. The conversation had slipped out of the usual television rhythm. This wasn't a panel disagreement. It was a collision of lived experiences, a clash of philosophies shaped by two very different journeys. Joy's voice grew firmer as she pushed back, and Kevin's tone sharpened in response. Each sentence seemed to erase the distance between them. Alyssa and Sunny tried to step in, redirect, lighten, soften, but the debate ignored every attempt. It was no longer something that could be moderated. It had become a confrontation neither side intended, but neither could escape. And in this dramatized retelling, it's clear why the moment felt so heavy. Both believed they were standing up for the truth. But the most explosive exchange was still ahead. The the comment that turned tension into something irreversible. It happened in an instant, the kind of instant that feels slow, heavy, deliberate, even if no one planned it that way. Joy Behar, her voice trembling with restrained frustration, told Kevin O'Leary that real families were struggling, that their survival wasn't a game or a strategy lesson. And Kevin, unwavering, replied with a certainty that felt almost surgical. He insisted that the mindset of limitation was more dangerous than any economic policy. He wasn't attacking people, he said. He was challenging excuses. But that distinction didn't land the way he thought it would. Joy's hands gripped the edge of the table. Kevin leaned forward, and suddenly the conversation wasn't about theory anymore. It wasn't charts, data, or hypotheticals. It was about lived pain, about frustration accumulated over years, about the emotional weight behind every question Joy had ever asked on that stage. The audience didn't make a sound. The co-hosts exchanged looks, each trying to calculate how to intervene without escalating what was unfolding. Sonny attempted to redirect, to bring the temperature down, but the moment had already tipped past moderation. Kevin spoke about responsibility. Joy heard blame. Joy spoke about injustice. Kevin heard defeatism. Their words collided in the space between them, each sentence adding pressure to a room that felt like it might burst. And although this is a dramatized retelling, moments like this resonate because they reveal something raw. Not anger for the sake of TV, but two people fighting for what they believe is right, even if neither can hear the other anymore. What came next wasn't louder, it was deeper. A line neither meant to cross, but once crossed, nothing would feel the same again. The shift was subtle at first, a slight crack in Joy Behar's voice, a tightening in Kevin O'Leary's expression. But then Kevin delivered a line that didn't raise the volume, it raised the stakes. He said that taking responsibility wasn't victim blaming, it was adulthood. It was meant as a principle, a viewpoint, but in that charged moment, the words landed like a personal attack. Joy's reaction was immediate, sharp, and honest. She told him not to condescend to her. The audience gasped, not because of the words themselves, but because they felt the emotional collision behind them. This wasn't the usual spirited back and forth. This was something far more human. Frustration meeting conviction, fatigue meeting certainty. Kevin didn't back down. He argued that age didn't equal wisdom, that mindset mattered more than years of experience. It wasn't meant as an insult, but the timing, the tone, the tension, everything made it feel like one. The other hosts froze, unsure whether to step in or let the moment breathe. Whoopi, normally quick to diffuse, hesitated, sensing this wasn't something she could patch over with a sentence. Joy leaned forward, her voice steady and strong, and said he was insulting working people. Kevin countered that he was challenging ideology, not individuals. But intent didn't matter anymore, only impact. Their philosophies collided with a force that neither of them seemed prepared for, each believing they were defending truth, fairness, and the people they cared about. In this dramatized retelling, this was the moment the studio realized something had cracked. Not anger for entertainment, but two worldviews that could no longer politely coexist. And the next moment would make that crack impossible to ignore. The uncomfortable truth settled in the room before anyone spoke it aloud. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. Joy Behar's voice wavered just enough to show the emotional weight she was carrying, and Kevin O'Leary, still composed, continued pressing his point with the precision of someone who believed deeply in what he was saying. Joy pushed back harder, reminding him that real people, real families, were affected by the system's failures. Kevin insisted he wasn't dismissing their struggles. He was pointing out solutions. But every attempt to clarify only deepened the divide. What he framed as empowerment felt to Joy like blame. What she framed as compassion felt to Kevin like resignation. Alyssa and Sonny tried stepping in, reaching for common ground, but the moment had already outgrown moderation. Each attempt to soften the tension dissolved instantly. The energy on set shifted from raised voices to something far more palpable. Exhaustion, conviction, frustration, and a quiet realization that they had reached the core of their disagreement. Joy accused Kevin of reducing people to transactions. Kevin countered with the argument that narratives of victimhood kept people dependent. Neither statement was said to wound, yet each one cut deeper than intended. And because this is a dramatized retelling, it mirrors the emotional truth rather than literal words. The feeling of two people standing on opposite cliffs, shouting across a canyon that had suddenly become wider than the table between them. For a split second, everything was still. No laughter, no audience reactions, no clever transitions, just silence thick enough to feel. Then came the moment no one expected, a moment that didn't raise voices but changed everything. The silence after Joy Behar's last words didn't feel like a pause. It felt like a breaking point. She stared across the table, not with anger now, but with something far heavier. Years of debates, years of defending the same arguments, years of carrying the weight of conversations that never seemed to change anything. It all surfaced in her eyes at once. Kevin O'Leary, still composed, tried to respond with the same conviction he'd carried throughout the exchange. He argued that telling people the system was rigged stripped them of agency. He insisted that belief in personal power was the starting point for change. His tone didn't rise, but the firmness behind his words made them land with undeniable force. Joy didn't flinch, but something inside her shifted. The audience sensed it. The co-hosts sensed it. Even Kevin seemed to sense it, that this wasn't just disagreement anymore. This was someone reaching the end of a long, exhausting road. Her voice softened, unexpectedly calm, when she finally spoke. She didn't challenge his economics. She didn't counter his argument. Instead, she questioned something deeper, whether any of these conversations, these endless, circular debates, ever truly changed anything. The room froze. This dramatized retelling echoes the emotional truth of moments like this. Not outrage for entertainment, but the quiet realization that frustration can outgrow the format it lives in. Joy admitted that she had started wondering whether all the talking, all the fighting, all the passionate exchanges were making any real difference at all. Her co-host tried to reassure her, but she wasn't looking for reassurance. She was facing a truth she'd tried to ignore. And then, in a moment that felt heavier than anything said before, she hinted at something no one expected, that she might be done. Not with the argument, with the show. The words came out of Joy Behar with a clarity that stunned the entire studio. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't break down. She simply spoke with the calm of someone who had finally reached a decision she'd been avoiding for far too long. She said she had been questioning whether anything they argued about on that stage ever truly made a difference, whether all the passion, all the conflict, all the years of fighting actually led anywhere. Kevin O'Leary unexpectedly softened. For the first time in the entire exchange, his expression shifted from conviction to concern. He told her not to walk away because of a disagreement. That people argue, that it was normal. But Joy shook her head. This wasn't about him. It wasn't about this single moment. It wasn't even about economics. It was about what she felt every time she sat at that table. The exhaustion of repeating the same battles that never moved forward. The audience sat frozen. The co-hosts looked at her with disbelief, their attempts to intervene caught between shock and fear of pushing her further. Whoopi gently suggested taking a break, but Joy refused. She wanted to finish what she had started saying. She wanted to speak honestly, maybe for the first time in years, without worrying about transitions, commercial cues, or studio expectations. She spoke about purpose, how she once believed her voice helped spark real conversations across the country, how she hoped her words uplifted people who felt unheard. But somewhere along the way, she feared it had all become noise, entertainment, a cycle without progress. And then she said it clearly, quietly, and without hesitation. She didn't want to keep doing this if it no longer mattered. The studio didn't breathe. Joy Behar's hands moved slowly, almost deliberately, as she reached for her microphone. That single motion sent a jolt through the studio, the kind that tells everyone something irreversible is about to happen. She placed the mic on the table with a steadiness that didn't match the shock on her co-hosts' faces. Alyssa tried to step toward her. Sunny reached out with a soft, pleading Joy wait. Even Whoopi, usually the anchor in chaotic moments, looked genuinely shaken. But Joy wasn't reacting to anyone now. She was speaking from a place deeper than the argument, deeper than the moment. She said she had been thinking about leaving long before this discussion. That today had simply revealed what she already knew. Kevin O'Leary stood, not in triumph, but discomfort. For the first time, he seemed unsure of what to say. He insisted he hadn't intended for their debate to push her to this point. But Joy only nodded. She knew this wasn't about blame. It was about clarity. In this dramatized retelling, the emotional truth is simple. Sometimes a breaking point isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. A realization that the weight you've been carrying isn't one you want to lift anymore. Joy turned toward the cameras. Not the table, not Kevin, not even her co-hosts. She addressed the viewers the way someone speaks to friends they've known for years. She thanked them. She acknowledged their support. She admitted she no longer felt she was creating the change she once hoped to inspire. And with a kind of peaceful finality, she said it was time for new voices to sit at that table. Then she walked away. No script, no dramatic exit line, just a woman choosing to be done. The studio remained completely still, as if the air itself couldn't catch up to what had happened. For a long moment after Joy Behar left the set, no one moved. The cameras kept rolling, but the studio felt suspended in time. The audience stared, wide-eyed, unsure whether they had just witnessed a dramatic moment or something far more personal. The co-hosts exchanged glances, not the usual on-air cues, but silent questions, concern, disbelief. Kevin O'Leary remained standing, his posture rigid, his expression conflicted. He hadn't won anything. Not the debate, not the moment, not the room. All he'd done was participate in a conversation that unexpectedly revealed someone else's exhaustion. Even he seemed to recognize the weight of what had unfolded. Whoopi finally broke the silence, attempting to offer reassurance to the viewers, but even her voice carried a tremor. She spoke about respecting Joy's feelings, about needing to regroup, about the unpredictability of live television. But underneath her words was the unmistakable truth. They had all been blindsided. In this dramatized retelling, the emotional reality is what matters. Not the particulars, but the feeling that everyone in that room had just crossed in a territory no script could guide them through.